Hello and welcome. As most of you will know, I've just come off the back of launching my double weave online course. And it's been a huge marathon to make the course, to get it all loaded onto the platform, to get everything done and dusted. And finally, I've reached that point. When I get to the end of a big project like that, one of my go-to things to do is to just unwind and relax with a project that is simple and that's familiar and that I know that I'm going to enjoy. So today I'm starting out on a new project. It's an old familiar friend. I'm going to be weaving fabric for a bag based on a pattern that I developed years ago, right at the beginning of the pandemic. And it's a pattern that I come back to over and over again, just because I like it and I enjoy it. So it has a tiny little bit of color in it, and it has a little bit of very subtle texture. But what I want to do today, more than anything else, is I want to take you through my preparations for beginning a new project. I think that we all get so excited at the idea of what we're going to make that when we actually sit down at our loom, we've sometimes rushed through the basics, and then our foundation is not in place, and because our foundation is not secure, then our weaving experience is actually not a pleasure. So I thought I would just take you through a simple routine that I use when I'm going to start a new project. I hope it helps. I'm Glynis from Weave at Brooklands. If you want more information on my double weave course, or on any of my courses for that matter, you will find all the information on my website. The link to my website is under the banner at the top of the page, and I'll put a link in the comments below as well. So the first thing that I do when I'm starting a project, before I even put up the warp or even think about a color scheme or anything like that, is I do a yarn wrap with the yarn that I've chosen. Now, if you're working with a familiar yarn, you don't necessarily need to go through this, but if you are working with a yarn that is unfamiliar to you, always best to do a wrap first so that you know that you're going to be using the correct sized reed. Now, for this project, I'm using the Shepherd's Callisto. So it's quite a thick cotton, but I do like the structure of it. And because this is going to be fabric for a bag, I want it to be a good, strong, robust fabric. And I think that the Callisto is going to work fantastically. It's quite a thick cotton, probably thicker than your average DK. And when I say DK, I'm talking about a double knit in terms of South African classifications. If I look at the meterage in relation to the weight, I've got 85 meters per 50 grams. So it is really quite a substantial yarn that I'm using. When I did my yarn wrap, I got 14 WPI. That means that ideally I should be using the 7.5 DPI reed. But because I'm making fabric for a bag and I want the fabric to be strong and I want it to be stable, I've decided to warp using my 10 dent reed. And I think that this is going to give me a great foundation for my weaving. Now, one of the things that a lot of people ask about is how do you treat the hem section if you're not going to have a fringe? So if I just pull up the cushion cover that I made for the double weave project, the little flap has a turned hem, which in this case I've just machine stitched. Very often if I'm making tea towels or placemats or something like that, I prefer to hand stitch, but that's just me. When you're going to have a turned hem like this, and you're working with a substantial cotton like the Callisto, if you have 2 rolls of hem at, say, the beginning and end of a placemat, or a tea towel or something like that, you get a really thick wad. You get a really thick roll. And I don't like that. So what I do is I weave my hem section using sewing thread. Just ordinary machine sewing thread. This is a polyester thread. It's better if you're working with cotton to use 100% cotton thread if you can get it. Sometimes it's not always easy to get the color selection in the 100% cotton, in which case polyester works absolutely fine. To start off with, the first thing I want to do is to close my gaps. And as a lot of you will know already, I don't go the route of putting loads of separators in place. I like to use Peggy Osterkamp's method for closing the gaps, and that means that you simply weave 3 or 4 picks without beating them into place. So this is my second pick. My warp obviously is on and it's tensioned, and I don't need to take you through that. There is a separate video for that. And this is my third pick. You can see that I've left quite a space between each of the picks, and if it looks as though my weaving sequence is a little bit awkward, it's because I'm working around a camera tripod so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. And this will be the last one, I think. And now I can just beat those down into place. So it's a little bit awkward. And the first few rows are always a bit wonky, but I have successfully closed my gaps. Now I can carry on and I can just even everything up and weave my hem section. The reason I've got this wavy line here is because that beating of those first few picks to close the gaps has just evened out any discrepancies that there were in the warp tension. So now I'm going to start with my hem section proper. You can see I'm now beating in a straight line. I'm not going to worry about those. Those are going to be cut away when we edge our piece on the sewing machine or on the overlocker before we actually start making up the fabric for the back. To advance my warp. You don't want to beat this section down terribly hard. If I were working with a finer thread in my warp for this section, there would be a tendency for the sewing thread to want to compact almost into a weft-faced structure. And we don't want that. We actually want it to be a relatively balanced weave as far as possible. The last thing that you want is to give yourself a dense roll because your weft has packed down too hard. So you're just going to weave sort of 2.5 to 3 centimeters for your hem section. You can see that it's evening out beautifully. Your first few centimeters or inches of your weaving are always a little bit unstable. It just takes kind of that long for the warp to balance itself out and settle down. Now, because I'm going to turn this hem section underneath, I'm not going to go to the trouble of sewing my hem on the loom, which I would do if I was going to have a fringed border. All I'm going to do is I'm going to take a tiny little bit of white glue, PVA glue, wood glue, whatever you want to call it. The bottle says Arts and Crafts white glue, but wherever you are in the world, it will have a different name. And all I do is I run a very thin line along the bottom of my weaving. I've ignored those first few foundational rows because those are totally out of place. And now I can just walk away, and when I come back and the glue's dried, I can relax and I can enjoy my project. This is an incredibly stable foundation. It's not going to move, it's not going to go anywhere, and it takes quite a lot of labor out of the whole process. So when this comes off the loom, I'll simply cut away the glue line and I'll straight away edge it on the zigzag on the sewing machine or on my overlocker. I hope this helps. As far as I'm concerned, your planning and your foundation for your weaving is as important as the actual weaving itself. And if those are in place, your project will be a pleasure. Until next time, thank you for watching. I appreciate your time.